In this section, we are going to work on the topic of emotional control, for which we are going to concentrate on defining what emotion you are feeling does to you because of those thoughts that hurt you and that you cannot get rid of. This healing process consists of 4 stages, which you can see in this analysis table, which we are going to fill out so that you can develop your own psychic antidotes so that you can deal with everything that makes you suffer on an emotional level. The first is emotional recognition, in which you will write if you are feeling sadness, anxiety, anguish, and other emotions, which we will explore later. The second is to establish the reason for that emotion, what the other person does to you. Why do you feel anger? It could be the emotion. And here we specify, because maybe that person must be laughing at me. This is just an introduction, so you can see how you should establish this analysis process. Later, we will go into detail of all this. The third phase is to define the feeling that this emotion generates in us. If you notice, we have already identified that we are perhaps experiencing anger, but here it is about being able to establish if what you feel is injustice, humiliation, shame, etc. In the box, I am going to leave you the explanation of these emotions so that it is easier for you to define what you have. And finally, the fourth stage is for you to determine why you feel the way you do. That is, if you feel injustice, the idea is that you define why. We are going to explore this in more depth, so don't worry if you don't quite get it. Here, I just want you to see the whole picture. So we have emotions, emotional motives, feelings, sentimental motives, and feeling motives. That is what I am going to teach you to recognize and eventually control through the psychic healing dynamics that you will be learning. Let's start with the first section, the one in which you define what emotion you are feeling. As I mentioned there, most people just say they suffer from everything. But it is very necessary that you can determine what it is that you are suffering from. Here, the idea is that you can write down with numbers from 1 to 10 so that you can define which emotion is most affecting you at this moment. Do you feel sadness? Defined as a constant desire to cry and the loss of hope, which in turn leads you to not want to do anything to solve that problem. Here, I am going to get ahead of myself a little, but if you look closely, the feeling that is associated with sadness is self-pity. You feel like no one cares about you. Therefore, clearly the problem here is to help you regain your self-confidence in order that you may understand that you don't need others. For example, do you feel anger? That constant anger that you can't get rid of? That desire to take revenge for something that was done to you in the past? If you notice, this emotion of anger is usually associated with a feeling of injustice, which in part shows that your problem is related to feeling that your ego has become smaller. That would be the problem we have to solve. If I tell you this, it is because, thanks to this very efficient exercise, you can now begin to see what is really happening with you. Little by little, you regain control of your emotions. What I am doing here is helping you induce a state of emotional control, which is what is usually done in therapy. The idea is that here you do it, but in therapy, this is achieved much more quickly because you have me to help you find those answers. Deep down, I am a guide of your emotions. What happens if you are experiencing frustration, which is an emotion that arises when your expectations have not been met. You had a life goal, you thought life was a specific way, but suddenly you realized that life was completely altered. As you can see, this emotion will be associated with a feeling of lack of control. You had a girlfriend or boyfriend with whom you had life goals, and suddenly your girlfriend or boyfriend broke up with you. Your intentions were frustrated, and that means that you cannot get rid of that emotion of discomfort. But when we recognize it, we can begin to establish the best medicines to heal your psyche. What happens with anxiety, which arises in people who constantly fear the future? So, you are anxious when you cannot live in your present because you are constantly thinking about the terrible consequences that might arise for you in the future. Deep down, I can live in peace because I don't know if my partner is going to leave me in the future. Or in the future, I could lose my job. Obviously, these are situations that occur in life, but the point here is to help you enjoy your present again. And what happens if you experience anguish, which is the fear of the past? You already saw that anxiety is a projection of what is going to happen to us in the future, while anguish arises in people who live constantly thinking about their past. There was some traumatic event in the past which leads them to fear that that event could manifest again in their present. This happens a lot with people who have suffered post-traumatic stress. Here, the idea is not to do in-depth work on these emotions. The only thing I want you to do is define what emotions you are feeling because of those obsessive thoughts that your psyche is subjecting you. Now we have identified the emotions you are experiencing. You already know that there is an emotion that manifests itself above others, and also that a secondary emotion might arise in you. That's why I told you to put in the numbers. That was the entire purpose of this exercise. That you recognize the emotions, because once we have done this, we are now in a position to develop the control phase. What we have done here is a process of emotional recognition. So every time you suffer from an obsessive thought, although you can already notice that this applies to other circumstances, I want you to define as a first state, because this has to be an automatic process in you, what emotion you are feeling. And from this, I am going to proceed in the next section to teach you some techniques so that you can regulate and control those emotions that are affecting you.